History is filled with the shattered remains of good intentions, the noble leader dethroned by cunning foes, the honest entrepreneur crushed by corrupt competition, the ethical politician outplayed by pragmatic strategists, the moral individual taken advantage of by those without a conscience. These aren't isolated incidents. They form a pattern too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. There seems to be a deep conflict between being morally good and being truly effective. Most advice tries to paper over this contradiction with hollow promises that virtue will win in the end. But what if this conflict is not a flaw in the system, but a feature? What if traditional ideas of goodness actually carry built-in weaknesses, weaknesses that lead to failure when others don't play by the same moral rules? Machiavelli, the 16th century political thinker and advisor from Florence, didn't turn away from this brutal reality. His ideas, especially in The Prince and discourses on Livy, continue to provoke discomfort, not because they are wrong, but because they're uncomfortably accurate. Machiavelli's experience. To understand Machiavelli's critique, we must look at the world he lived in. Renaissance Italy was a battlefield of rival city-states, foreign invasions, backroom politics, and shifting alliances. Machiavelli served Florence as a diplomat and military organizer until the Medici family returned to power in 1512. He lost his position, was accused of conspiracy, and tortured. His ideas weren't born in an ivory tower. They were forged in political fire. He saw with his own eyes how leaders who clung to Christian ideals, like humility, faith, and mercy, were often crushed. Their people suffered under their idealism. His writings weren't cynical. They were born from necessity. He needed to understand why good leaders so often failed. Virtue versus virtue. Central to Machiavelli's philosophy is the difference between virtue and what society calls virtue. The church preached kindness, patience, and piety. But Machiavelli's virtue meant adaptability, strategic thinking, and the ability to achieve goals without being bound by rigid morality. As he said in The Prince, every prince should want to be seen as merciful, but he must not let mercy be abused. This wasn't a dismissal of mercy, it was a warning. Mercy must serve your mission. If it undermines your position, it becomes a weakness, not a strength. Machiavelli didn't say we should discard values altogether. Instead, he challenged us to be wise about how we apply them. A leader who insists on moral purity, no matter the situation, is likely to be destroyed by those who don't play by the same rules. 3 traps of traditional morality. Machiavelli identified 3 major dangers that come from blind adherence to traditional virtue. Predictability. A person who always acts morally is easy to predict. And if your enemies know your next move, they can outmaneuver you. That's why Machiavelli wrote, "A prince doesn't need all good qualities, but he should appear to have them. If he always acts on them, they will harm him. If he only seems to, they will help him." The honest negotiator who never bluffs, the merciful ruler who always forgives, the loyal ally who never walks away from a bad deal, all of them can be manipulated. Their consistency becomes a weapon others can use against them. Self-imposed limits. The moral person binds their own hands. The ruthless opponent does not. Machiavelli put it plainly: the way we live is far from the way we ought to live. One who clings to ideals instead of facing reality will ruin himself. This imbalance is everywhere. The company that pays all its taxes competes with others that use loopholes. The nation that follows international law confronts rogue states that ignore it. The honest person is surrounded by liars who face no such constraints. The good limit themselves, the wicked do. Reputation fragility. Being known for virtue is dangerous. Once you're expected to always act morally, any deviation, even for good reason, can destroy your reputation. As Machiavelli said, men judge more by what they see than what they feel. Everyone sees who you appear to be. Few know who you truly are. The kind leader who must act tough, the transparent company that needs privacy at times, the patient friend who finally draws a line, all risk being condemned as hypocrites. Their past goodness becomes a trap. These three pitfalls form what we can call the virtue paradox. In cooperative settings, virtue is a strength. But in adversarial or competitive situations, it can become your undoing. The challenge isn't whether virtue matters, but whether the traditional approach to it can survive in a world where others don't play fair. The psychology of failure. Machiavelli's insights weren't just political. They tapped into timeless human psychology. He exposed why moral people keep falling into the same traps. First, virtue breeds overconfidence. Good people often believe that being right means they'll succeed. But as Machiavelli said, those who act only as they should will end up destroyed. They assume the world will reward their goodness. It doesn't. The just leader thinks fairness will win. The honest business owner assumes customers will choose integrity over low prices. The ethical person expects reciprocity from others who don't think the same way. Morality blinds them to the need for strategy. Second, morality often relies on emotion instead of results. Men will not do good unless they must, Machiavelli observed. But many moral actors prioritize feeling good over achieving goals. They refuse to compromise, even when it means failure. They lose battles because they refuse to bend. The idealist who won't make a deal watches the entire mission collapse. The negotiator who rejects slightly unfair terms ends up with nothing. The courageous stand for principle leads not to a moral victory, but to defeat. Third, good people misread others. Machiavelli warned, men are easily deceived by those who know how to lie. Moral people assume others share their values. They project honesty, fairness, and loyalty onto those who don't deserve it, and are blindsided when they're betrayed. The honest expect honesty, the fair expect fairness, the loyal expect loyalty, but not everyone plays by those rules. By assuming shared virtue, they set themselves up to be taken advantage of. These mental patterns explain why even when people understand Machiavelli's warnings, they fail to act on them. The emotional rewards of morality, certainty, righteousness, the belief that others will reciprocate, can overpower the cold demands of strategy. The path of effective virtue. But Machiavelli never said virtue should be abandoned, only that it must be adapted. What's needed is Effective virtue, morality that works in the real world. Effective virtue focuses on the results, not emotional satisfaction. People often quote Machiavelli as saying, "The end justifies the means," though he never wrote those exact words. Still, the spirit of the idea is clear. If your goal is good, you must be flexible in how you achieve it. Effective virtue doesn't mean becoming ruthless. It means being wise enough to know when goodness helps and when it hurts. Machiavelli's real stance was more layered than many assume. He didn't discard ethics, but insisted that outcomes matter more than strict allegiance to moral rules, especially in a world where there's no unbiased judge of human action. It is the results that define value, not just intentions. As he wrote in The Affairs of Men, and especially rulers, what counts most is the final consequence. This doesn't give license to do anything, but it reveals a deeper truth. Morality that isn't backed by practical effectiveness ultimately collapses. Even noble causes fail when their champions are too rigid. A leader who insists on peace at all costs and allows violent enemies to gain ground. A business that clings to perfect ethics only to go under and lose its influence. Or an honest person, constantly deceived by manipulators. Each undermines the very ideals they aim to protect by ignoring strategic reality. The first demand of effective virtue is flexibility, not blind consistency. A wise ruler, Machiavelli insisted, must know when to break his promise if it puts him at risk, especially when the reasons for that promise have vanished. This isn't a blanket praise of deceit. It's an understanding that circumstances change, and leaders must adapt or perish. The truly effective actor upholds clear values, but their outward expression shifts with the environment. They know when openness builds trust and when secrecy protects it. They see when cooperation moves things forward and when competition must take its place. They know which compromises enable progress and which ones guarantee collapse. Second, effective. Virtue requires seeing people as they are, not as we wish them to be. Men should either be treated kindly or crushed, Machiavelli said, not to promote cruelty, but to highlight that half measures provoke revenge. Small injuries lead to retaliation. Total defeat does not. This is realism, not ruthlessness. T. Strategic moral actor doesn't assume others share their values. They can't observe any, they can't test, they can't adapt. Trust is earned in steps, not given all at once. Compliance is checked, not assumed. They understand that others might follow entirely different codes, and they tailor their approach accordingly. These ideas form a framework for virtue that survives conflict. It's not about feeling righteous while failing. It's about actually accomplishing moral goals in a world that doesn't always reward idealism. This isn't the abandonment of ethics. It's the realization that ineffective morality is no morality at all. Modern-day relevance. Machiavelli's ideas still echo powerfully in today's world, showing cracks in conventional morality that many refuse to acknowledge. In business, companies that follow high ethical standards but lack strategy often lose out to less scrupulous competitors. The answer isn't to abandon ethics, but to pursue what we now call strategic CSR. corporate social responsibility that strengthens the company's position. This might involve investing in green tech that saves money, treating employees well to boost performance, or building clean supply chains that lower reputational risk. In politics, honest and civil leaders are often edged out by those who use manipulation and emotional appeal. The answer isn't to lie, but to communicate strategically. Truth must be wrapped in emotional resonance. The virtuous politician must understand what moves people, not just what's factually correct. In global relations, countries that honor international law often face enemies who break those rules whenever convenient. Again, the solution isn't to forsake law, but to understand that for laws to matter, they need credible enforcement. Strategic flexibility ensures that a nation's values survive, not just in words but in action. In personal life, people who value honesty, generosity, and tolerance can be taken advantage of by those who exploit them. The goal is not to become manipulative, but to set flexible boundaries. Psychologists use this term to describe a mature way of keeping values intact while adjusting how they're applied based on how others behave. Across all these fields, one truth remains: virtue that ignores strategy fails even on its own terms. A business that collapses can't keep being ethical. A politician who loses power can't implement just policies. A nation that's overrun can't uphold its ideals. A person constantly exploited eventually stops giving. The rise of the virtuous strategist. Machiavelli's core message is not that goodness is wrong, but that goodness with no plan is doomed. Blind adherence to moral codes, no matter the outcome, is a trap. But this doesn't mean we should throw ethics away. It means we must make them smarter. We need something better, a new model we might call strategic virtue or effective goodness. The virtuous strategist holds tight to their core values, but expresses them with skill and precision, shaped by the needs of each moment. They don't aim for moral perfection, they aim for impact. They see people clearly, without idealism, and plan accordingly. They understand that values without results are empty, and that virtue cut off from effectiveness becomes a hollow display. Machiavelli wrote, "A man who tries to act virtuously in every situation will come to ruin among so many who are not virtuous." He wasn't glorifying vice, he was warning us, if we want good to win, we must arm it with strategy. This is perhaps his greatest insight, that true virtue isn't just about following rules, but about achieving real, lasting good in a world full of resistance. The ruler who holds power long enough to pass wise laws, the business that treats others well and still thrives, the individual who lifts others without being drained. These are examples of goodness that works. As Machiavelli said, when the life and liberty of the country are at stake, one must forget about glory or shame, justice or injustice, and ask only, what will save us? This is not moral chaos, it is clarity. It reminds us that ethics alone aren't enough. They must be made real through strategic action. The true measure of virtue is not how pure it appears, but how much good it actually achieves. That's the real genius of Machiavelli. He didn't tear virtue down. He showed us how to make it a stand firmly. And in a world still full of wolves, that's wisdom we can't afford to ignore.